Good day, my name is Anthony Patch and this is Pulse. Today is the 30th of July of 2024. Today we're going to be speaking about the strike by Israel on Beirut that just took place a few hours prior to this broadcast. Today is Tuesday. Also, there was an attack on a Russian air base in the far north of Russia by a drone that apparently is attributed to Ukraine. We'll go through the details on that a little bit. There had been some reports that perhaps, and I underscore perhaps, that this drone may have originated out of Finland. So we will go through, as I view it, the repercussions had that drone actually been launched from Finland. By most accounts, if not all, this drone was launched from Ukraine into Russia. Nonetheless, we'll look at the probable repercussions of this attack on a Russian airfield that destroyed a Russian bomber by a drone, whether from Ukraine or from Finland. But we'll go through that in a moment. The breaking news is this attack by Israel on Lebanon, the capital city of Beirut. So let me go to one of the reports on this very quickly. This is being reported, and it's the same story on numerous websites, news sites, but reading from the Telegraph out of the United Kingdom, Israel targets Hezbollah commander in Beirut strike. Israel has targeted a senior Hezbollah commander in a Beirut suburb in retaliation for an attack that killed 12 children last weekend. Witnesses heard a loud blast in the Lebanese capital as the Israeli Defense Force launched a targeted strike on Fouad Sukkar, whom it said was responsible for the Golan Heights attack on Saturday. A security source told Reuters that this was unclear whether Sukkar, who is the group's second in command and in charge of military activities, had survived. The strike took place in the Dahi neighborhood of Beirut, which is known as a Hezbollah stronghold, and came a day after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed a severe response to the Golan Heights attack. The U.S. has reportedly urged Israel to avoid the Lebanese capital and civilian infrastructure to avoid causing collateral damage. Okay. So I think you all can appreciate the repercussions of this. I think this obviously represents an escalation on the part of Israel to engage in a larger and then regionally a broader war against Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and of course Iran, who was targeted in the speech, in the address by Netanyahu to the U.S. Congress last Wednesday, stating at least 5 times, targeting Iran itself as the source of all, as he put it, terroristic activity in the Middle East. Iran, for its part, following that address by Netanyahu, has stated that this will be a all-axis attack against Israel. So things are ramping up. Whether this will be a measured response, and that will be it on the part of the IDF. However, should it be determined that the second in command actually was taken out, then that would imply, I think, that a larger response on the part of Hezbollah is forthcoming. Certainly Israel is doing this with the expectation that there will be a larger response by Hezbollah, and that's one of the reasons that they conduct these types of strikes. Let me see here. So the latest report is Hezbollah commander may have survived the strike, Fouad Sukkar, He may have survived the Israeli airstrike, according to Reuters. Two security sources told Reuters, but these have not been confirmed at this point. Okay. I'm broadcasting at about 2:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday the 30th, so I'm not aware. I was preparing for this live stream for this Pulse video on YouTube and other platforms, so these reports may have been confirmed prior to my going on the air here. So let's move over to the report of this drone strike on the Olenia airfield in Russia. This is out of Politico. And again, most of the coverage reads the same. It doesn't matter the source. Ukraine drones reportedly hit Russian airfield in the Arctic. This would be the Arctic Circle. This took place on Saturday, July 28th. This is reported in Politico. But Saturday was the day of the actual attack. Ukrainian drones struck Russia's Olenia airfield in the far north of the country on Saturday, hitting a strategic bomber, according to Ukrainian and other media reports. The drones targeted a Tupolev Tu-22M3 supersonic long-range missile carrier at the strategic aviation base, according to Ukrainian Pravda. Russia has not commented. Again, this is a report from the 28th. Today is the 30th. Russia has not commented on the attack. This is located in the Arctic on the Kola Peninsula. The Olenia Air Base is more than 1,900 kilometers north of Ukraine, but a mere 200 kilometers from the Finnish border. In response to the drone strikes, Finnish President Alexander Stubb said, quote, "We have no cause for concern in Finland. We have the situation under control and are able to respond." This according to Ukrainian Pravda. The Olenia airfield has been used by Russian forces to attack civilian infrastructure in Ukraine with cruise missiles. It was Tu-95MS bombers from Olenia that less than a month ago bombed. Now, this is an erroneous report, so I won't read the rest of this. That's propaganda. At any rate, while not acknowledging or commenting on the Olenia drone strike, Ukrainian President Zelensky issued a statement on Saturday praising his military's attacks on Russian bases in the occupied regions of Ukraine. Each destroyed Russian airbase, each destroyed Russian military aircraft, whether on the ground or in the air, means saving Ukrainian lives, he said. All right, I'll just give you my observations on this drone strike relative to statements made in the recent past by Russian President Putin. We have been talking recently about the threshold for the employment of nuclear weapons. I won't go into a lot of detail on the nuclear weapons because I'm trying to abide by community guidelines and standards here on YouTube. If you'd like to join us through anthonypatch.com and subscribe to our live streams, I have that private platform wherein I'm able to go into a greater detail regarding nuclear weapons, strategic plans, and what I'm anticipating the chain of events to be as thresholds are lowered for the employment. But Netanyahu has said repeatedly over the last several months that each time a red line is crossed, a red line defined by Russia, that lowers the threshold for the use of nukes, tactical nukes, strategic intercontinental nukes, and the like. The issue here with this red line is that Putin has stated that if there is an exceptional, that's his word, an exceptional threat to the sovereignty of Russia, the Republic of Russia, the Russian Federation, I should be more specific, a threat to the sovereignty and the territory of Russia, that in an exceptional, in an extraordinary, he's used that word as well, case or set of circumstances, this would trigger their nuclear doctrine, which means there does not need to be an order issued out of the military command, out of Moscow itself, in order to launch nuclear weapons. The orders have been written and signed by Putin over a year ago, distributed to local commanders of these nuclear forces, be they submarine, land-based, fixed position, or mobile, or airborne bomber aircraft, such as we're talking about, that are positioned at the Olenia airfield, air base. The implications here are that Ukraine is crossing the red line when it bombs within Russian territory, taking out a military target. But in Putin's definition that I'm repeating, bombing Russian assets, be they civilian or military, within Russia itself threatens the territory and the sovereignty, as it's defined by Putin, the sovereignty of Russia. Thus, what I am observing and concluding is that even though this was a drone and it took out one aircraft, this is lowering the threshold for the use of at least tactical nuclear devices. Again, I won't go into the details, ranges and yields and things like that here. I'll reserve that for our private live stream platform to discuss those points. But I do want to bring this information to you that the Olenia Air Base is more than 1,900 kilometers north of Ukraine, but it is a mere 200 kilometers from the Finnish border. Okay? So 1,900 kilometers flying a drone into Russia itself. Ukraine wants to claim that this is Russian occupied, Russia occupying Ukrainian territory. However, this is a Russian air base. Therefore, it is considered Russian territory. Whether it's debated as to whether it's Ukrainian territory that has been in a military manner taken and occupied by Russia, from a military standpoint, it makes no difference. The fact that it is occupied and controlled by Russian forces defines it, from a warfare perspective, defines it as Russian territory. Now, I find it rather difficult to believe the media reports of 1,900 kilometers. That distance by a drone is pretty much unheard of. When we compare this to the recent strike on the oil port in Yemen by the IDF, they flew fighter bombers. These are multi-role jet aircraft that are able to engage in air-to-air combat as well as delivering a bomb payload. They had to be refueled mid-air, refueled by tanker aircraft 3 times. These are fighter aircraft. And the distance was relatively similar. It was a little less than 2,000 kilometers, overflying Saudi Arabia, passing through Jordan. So here, 1,900 kilometers for a small drone, to me, doesn't add up. Now, I don't know the drone, I don't know the capabilities, I don't know if the range has been extended in terms of fuel capacity, but it also, How did it fly undetected? Why was it not intercepted? Granted, drones are difficult to detect and to intercept, but nonetheless, that's quite a distance to go undetected. My point here is that I am aware of one report. I cannot cite the source here. It's not secret. It's not a confirmed source, so I'm not giving the source. But I will say there is this one report that this drone was launched from Finland itself. 200 kilometers is a lot more logical and understandable and feasible than 1,900 kilometers for a drone. So let's look at the implications as I view it. Not only do we have this escalation on the part of the IDF against Hezbollah, that of course is a catalyst to perhaps a much larger regional conflict in the Middle East, and simultaneously, and really not geographically speaking that far to the north, we have Ukraine engaging with Russia, and now to the Arctic Circle, taking out a Russian bomber. These are nuclear capable bombers. If Finland was the source of this drone, doesn't matter if the drone was the property of the Ukrainian forces or supplied by the US or some other NATO nation, doesn't really matter. It is the point of origin, where it was launched from, that is the real issue. Putin has made it very clear that if Russia itself is attacked, and again, I defined the airfield as Russian territory because it is occupied by Russia. If Russian territory is attacked from a NATO nation, we're not talking about Ukraine because Ukraine is not a part of NATO. That's the reason for the whole conflict. Finland is. Finland, we reported on this about 6 weeks ago, made available to the United States specifically 15 of its bases for U.S. military troops and equipment to take up residence in those 15 Finnish military bases. Now, of course, Finland's on the border, shares the border with Russia. If NATO, by way of Finland, actually attacked Russia, this lowers the threshold even lower on the part of Netanyahu employing tactical nukes, something he's already been talking about, he's been threatening with. Now, as I understand how Putin is portrayed by many in the alternative media that have a military background and an intelligence background, and they describe Putin is someone who's not prone to being reactionary. His history is one of very measured responses. Therefore, since this strike on this bomber aircraft took place on Saturday, and we're not aware of any direct responses on the part of Russia because of that, we can say that, yes, at this point it appears that Putin is being reserved, that he is restraining any retaliatory strikes. What that says to me is that this drone did not originate out of Finland. That in fact, as most of the media is reporting, the drone did originate out of Ukraine. Nonetheless, this is as classified, this bomber is classified as a strategic weapon. That means it has the ability to fly beyond its borders and even has the ability to fly as far as the United States. You know that in the past few days there have been the reports of Russian and Chinese military exercises. 2 Chinese bombers, strategic nuclear bombers, and 2 Russian strategic nuclear bombers operating in international airspace just outside the boundary of the U.S. controlled airspace just off the coast of Alaska. So this aircraft that was taken out is a strategic bomber. It can play a role in reaching the United States. Consider that with the backdrop of about 2 months ago, Ukrainian drones were targeting 3 of the early warning radar installations in Russia itself. One of the installations suffered damage to 2 of its towers. This prompted Putin in a press conference to state what I stated to you earlier about exceptional conditions, exceptional threats to strategic sovereignty of Russian territory, the sovereignty of Russia, and the integrity of its territory being threatened. What he was talking about is the early warning radar systems being targeted and attacked. Going forward beyond that minimal targeting, they would consider that an attempt by the West, by NATO, by the US, to blind Russia to an incoming preemptive strike of strategic nuclear weapons launched by the United States against Russia. And that would also include the short-range missile attacks originating out of Ukraine against Russia. The radar installations are for intercontinental ballistic missile systems, the detection, the early warning. Therefore, I put in a similar category what Putin said about the radar installations. I think his mindset is the same concerning the loss of a nuclear bomber, a strategic asset. Imagine if the United States, let's say in Alaska, suffered the loss of a strategic nuclear bomber. Whether it had a nuke on board or not doesn't matter. Just the loss of the bomber, a U.S. bomber. How would the U.S. respond to that? So I think Putin has been very restrained and conservative in the loss of this strategic asset. But my point in sharing this with you is to again illustrate how low the threshold is for the use of tactical nukes and perhaps intercontinental strategic nuclear weapons. I bring this to your attention for your awareness, not for the promotion of fear, not to be sensational, but just so that you understand what is going on, so that you're aware of this. Oftentimes things like this go unreported in the mainstream narrative, especially in the West. CNN, ABC, CBS, ABC, doesn't matter. The mainstream doesn't cover it. So I bring it to your attention in case you missed it. I view this as very significant in the fact that Finland is even mentioned in the context that there is an interview of the Finnish president when this may purely have been a Ukrainian strike against Russia. It's 200 miles from the Finnish border, this airfield. So yes, there is a logical reason to bring Finland into the story, into the discussion. But I wanted to share this observation about Finland, setting aside the drone attack, but going to the issue that Putin has been addressing. Should any NATO nation originate an attack into Russia itself, that would result in the standing orders that have been signed, delivered, they've been issued to the commanders of the nuclear forces. This could trigger, at least in the European theater, a nuclear attack. Now I want to go back to Israel, and then we'll wrap this up. I have elaborated in my private live streams about the estimated quantity of nuclear weapons that Israel possesses. And I've elaborated as to the deployment and the utilization of those. Again, I can't share that here. Nonetheless, we have NATO. We have this hair trigger situation in terms of the use of nukes. The restraint so far that Putin has exercised. But now we have this event with Hezbollah, the bombing of Beirut. Whether or not the second in command was killed, it doesn't change the dynamics of the situation. This is an escalation on the part of Israel. I'll say very briefly, the IDF does not have the ability to overcome Hezbollah. Essentially, right now, Israel is encountering enemies on 7 fronts. Israel is surrounded. The IDF is not in a position to win a war with Hezbollah because they also have the Houthis out of Yemen that have declared a week ago that they have declared open warfare against Israel. You still have the Gaza conflict. And now Netanyahu is pushing for a greater conflict with Hezbollah, which of course folds in Iran, whom he cited 5 times as the cause, as the source of the terroristic activities, his label, not mine, in all of the Middle East. To conclude, it appears that we have 2 conflicts, the Middle East and Ukraine with Russia, that could result in the use of nuclear weapons. Therefore, I would urge you to pay close attention to not only my reports going forward here in Pulse. I would encourage you to look at my most recent Pulse videos over the last several days to give you some background. If you want a deeper dive into this, please join us on our private live streams through anthonypatch.com. But look at other sources as well. I don't have all the information and don't have the time to present a lot of information on YouTube. But pay attention to what's going on, because this does directly affect the United States. It's too easy for us here in the U.S. to think, well, that's across the Atlantic Ocean, that's on the other side of the planet, that's the Middle East, that's Ukraine, that's Russia. It doesn't have anything to do with my everyday activities here in the U.S. That could very quickly change in a heartbeat. So please pay attention to this unfolding of events, Russia, Ukraine, and the Middle East in general. It does appear that the Ukrainian forces are nearly completely decimated, so that may be de-escalating. It might. I said this in the last live stream. it may be that the tempo of warfare may be declining with respect to Ukraine, while the tempo of warfare in the Middle East is increasing. It's accelerating. But we could have a nuclear event in either location at any time. God bless you all.